And on today's podcast, I'm delighted to welcome Brian May. How are you today, Brian?
Doing great. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Super, my pleasure. So let's get this started. Where are you right now on planet Earth?
Good question. I'm in Florida. I'm in Boca Raton.
Okay, so if you were to give a review of Florida as a travel website for any individual or group of individuals who want to go on holiday or they're planning to move there for work reasons, sell it.
Sell it. Well, we have Florida Man, which is awesome. We have crazy people running around all over the place.
Cool.
Um, the sale is this. The sale is if you like warm weather and you like being outside in the beach, it's amazing. I wouldn't say like I'm the biggest advocate of it. I'm from New York and I don't know, you know New Yorkers. New Yorkers love New York. So I miss New York, but I do love the weather. I love the people and Florida's just fun, you know? Like right now it's I don't know, like 85 degrees. It's a beautiful day. It's just amazing. But, I miss New York. I miss the food. I miss the people. Florida is one of those places where if you have a lot of money, it's amazing. And if you don't, it can be really trashy.
Right, okay, we'll say nothing. So, I mean, in terms of anybody that's planning to go in the coming weeks or months, I mean, we've seen reports of snow recently and so on. I mean, are you on the north part of Florida? Are you down near the tip, near
I'm
the
I'm like
Keys?
an hour north of Miami.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you're okay. You have
Yeah, no, this is like the real deal, Florida. It's beautiful weather. I love it. I have a 5-year-old, and he's one of the reasons that, I'm here because I want to be outside with him. He's always outdoors, he's doing stuff. So, no, it's a fun place. It's a lot of fun. And my fiance is like part of a boat club. So we go on the boat with her boat. So there's like a lot of fun outdoor things to do here.
cool. You gave it a good rating there. Five out of five. Brilliant.
Yeah, I'd say 5 out of 5.
And in terms, you mentioned the weather there. I mean, is it get a bit too hot, or do you find it very comfortable, especially coming from New York? Do you have to adapt a
So
little bit?
right now, this is the best time. If anyone's coming, come right now.
Right.
In July and August, you will melt to death.
Okay. That's that's a good effort. You need your factor 50 or your factor 100. So, Brian, I gave a little bit of an introduction about yourself before the podcast. So, can you tell this little bit more to the listeners?
Definitely, definitely. Well, I like I said, I definitely appreciate you having me on here. My background is New York. I grew up on Long Island. I was in Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan for a very long time of my life. And my background's mostly in real estate. I graduated from college with a business degree. I got into real estate. I even bought my first house when I was 21 years old. And I just took it from there. I met the right people. I opened up an office with partners, very successful brokerage. We did a lot. We did flips. We had rentals. I still do. And then I sold my business to one of the guys from Million Dollar Listing on Bravo, and that was amazing. And then COVID happened, and then everything kind of shifted. So that's like my previous life. My New York life is mostly business.
Right.
And then, in 2021, I had a major, major tragedy that happened to me, to my son. I was married. My son was born in 2019, so now he's 5. And it was in 2021, my wife, Devora, passed away.
I'm sorry.
And so it was one of those things that was just, you know, the way I describe it is, how like in Marvel and in movies they talk about multiverses, and it's like your mind kind of it kind of like plans what's going to happen. Like, you go outside and it's okay, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. And when Dev passed away, it was just one of those things that I never thought was possible. She was younger than me. And so when it happened, it was just really shocking, really, really shocking to say the least. And so my son and I, we came to Florida and just rebuilding. And, it's interesting because, like in LA and California right now, they have these crazy fires going on and a lot of people lost their stuff. And I very much feel like that on a certain emotional level. because I feel like I'm living like that. Like you asked me, how's Florida? I feel like I'm just living in a different reality than what I thought. And sometimes I even wake up and I'm like, okay, is this my reality? Because it's so different than what I thought would happen.
Right. And do you feel like you're on autopilot?
No, I really try to. It's a good question. I think that what happens, I try all these techniques to get out of autopilot. I think autopilot is really, it's like time just flies, you know? It's like when you're driving home and all of a sudden you just get there and you're like, who was driving? How did I get here? And so even with driving, I like to go different places, get home different directions. I like to do little things just to keep it sharp because I feel like that's what happens. We are very much living in a society right now where people are very sheep and herd and just go along and they don't really know what's happening. So I don't like to be like that.
And can I just ask Brian, without going into too much details, but how did you cope mentally? I mean, you mentioned there your child was so young.
Yeah.
And this happens. I mean, how did you cope? I'd love to get into the mind because I don't know how I would cope. I don't know how I would manage that. How
Yeah.
did you do it? And
No,
obviously,
it's
tell me
crazy.
now. I mean, are you still doing it?
Totally.
Okay.
Totally. I think that one of the problems that people have, or when people try to put themselves in a mindset of what's going to happen, right? It's there's no, okay, I finished the class. There's no, I finished the race or I got to the top of the mountain. It's a very much evolving kind of emotional thing. And so at the beginning, definitely 5 stages of grief. They don't always come in that order. And at the beginning was very shocking. I think at the very beginning it was like really I was like closed off. I was really just like I don't know what's going on. And thankfully for me, I did have my son. So I didn't have the ability to like go into a deep dark depression. So at the same time that I was healing and coping, I was also on the beach with my son in Florida, and he was having the time of his life. He understands what's going on in one way or another. And I have great stories for you. I mean, even now he understands more and more, and it's fascinating. But it really helped pull me out of being in a depression. So one of the ways I coped was really focusing on my son.
Right. And
That's a
the
big one.
support mechanism around you, did you have much support?
Totally. I had my parents. My mom recently passed.
I'm
My
sorry.
mom passed in May. But I had my parents. I had a lot of help. I have amazing friends. I have friends that I've known since I was a little kid. And I also reached out, like I reached out to coaches, to psychologists, to shamans, to breathwork people. I had a lot of groups that were very helpful. Luckily in New York, I have a lot of friends and just a big network of people. And I met people through people through people. And I met just fantastic. Like I met a shaman who was super fantastic. I still stay in touch with him. And then he learned how to be a shaman from a woman in Mexico. And then I met her. And
Right.
so just one thing leads to another, like a spider web. And it's fantastic, but really studying and learning also got me to cope
Right.
because I wanted to see like how the mind thinks and I wanted to see how my mind thinks.
I mean, it's kind of interesting as well because I mean, from your side of it as well, Brian. I mean, when you were going, say, through the grief, was there awkwardness between other people? I don't mean
Of
specifically
course.
from you. Did they find it awkward? I mean,
Oh,
coming to you,
100%.
right? And how did you notice that though?
Totally.
You totally okay. And
Totally.
what
I
could you
think
do?
it's a great question. You know that? I've never been asked that. And it's an amazing question. Um, you know who Larry David is from Curb Your
Oh, he's
Enthusiasm?
funny. Yeah. Very
So
funny.
as a Jewish guy, I relate to him, and I relate to that kind of awkwardness that he does sometimes.
No filter. Yeah.
It's amazing. And so there's situations that happen that are awkward. And I listen, very honestly and authentically, sometimes I am awkward, right? So sometimes me being awkward, I'm okay with awkward situations because I'm already used to it,
Yeah.
which is interesting. Like like I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of awkward slash sad. You know, I would go to the pharmacy to pick up my medicine. And so I remember the first time I went to the pharmacy to pick up my medicine after Devora passed, it was probably like a month after. And I go to the pharmacy and they're like, "Oh, we have a script for Devora." And so now I have to, now you have to go through this whole thing, talk to people. And so at the beginning, and when I say beginning, really for the first 6 months, it's like everyone you meet, you're constantly having to go through the story, the what happened, and it's a lot. And one of the things I learned was, some days I would be in a happy mood,
Yeah.
right? And I didn't want to get dragged down. So there were times where I would just say it and disclaim, like have a little disclaimer and say it. Sometimes I wouldn't say it, right?
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, if it's a friend or family, I have to say it. But there's all these, if you think of like a bullseye, if you think of a dartboard, you have the center, which is your family, your loved ones, your close friends, and then you have your acquaintances, but then you have the lady at the pharmacist, you have the mailman, you have all these people that go out and out and out.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many of those outer rings exist in your life that you just don't realize.
What would you say to them, say, looking back on experience? What would you say to those individuals now in terms of looking back, kind of like, it's okay to come to me. It's okay to talk to me. It's okay to communicate with me with that awkwardness. What would you say in like in hindsight? For
I
anyone
think
that's kind of going through something similar that probably feels it's awkward to reach out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is just accepting that some of this is going to be awkward.
Right.
Accepting that it's not going to be easy all the time. You might be in a mind frame that you don't want to go into it. And then you're going to be in this situation where you don't want to lie and you don't want to not say anything. And so I think it's just what I do is I just, like I said, I leave like a little disclaimer, like, John, I got to tell you something that's really crazy that happened. I really want you to brace yourself and then just go from there. Um, and it's never easy because as soon as you say it, their whole energy will drop. And it's a challenge. Listen, there's a lot of things that will happen that there's no way around it. That's the truth. And that's part of the process of the resilience. That's part of the process of growing and building those deeper roots. You have to go through that. So I don't look at it as a negative thing.
Right. And did you have during that any of that period, did you have a light bulb moment where, you were having the down moment specifically? Did you kind of go, look, I need to get myself a slap on the face here, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that really was a light bulb moment, I still do. I have a Spotify playlist. We were talking about Spotify before we pressed record. I
Yep.
have a Spotify playlist that, reminds me of Devora. I have one that we created that we actually used on road trips and stuff, which is more of a happy kind of thinking playlist. And of course, I have one that's a sad playlist that really reminds me. And so when you go through these waves of up and down, and there's a lot of waves, everyone talks about it, but they're really, when you go through it, you're like, wow, that is a perfect metaphor.
Right.
And, when I was going into a really dark, deep, kind of depression, kind of very low. And for whatever reason, it kind of went away. The wave subsided. And for a while, I'm not going to say happy, but for a while, I was just really just living my life, taking care of my son, living my life. And one day I'm like, wow, like, am I never going to feel that sadness again? And I almost missed the sadness. I almost felt a little guilty for not feeling the sadness.
Right.
And I remember I was in my car and I was driving, and all of a sudden that wave hit me like pure sadness. And even though it was sad, I was actually kind of happy that it was back.
Okay.
And so like I got this new perspective of it where we're humans living this human experience. And the fact is that everyone doesn't like talking about death, but every single person that you know will die.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things that's the most ironic because people get awkward, people don't know what to say, but it shouldn't be that shocking in the sense that we know we're all going to die, right? What's the
Yeah.
famous line? We're all going to pay taxes and die.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, we don't know how to deal with it because it's something that gets put on the side, like in the shadows.
Yeah.
And so, one of the reasons that I'm more public about this kind of thing, and a lot of people are, is really to bring it to light, to say like it's okay, and everyone goes through it, whether it's a grandparent, whether it's God forbid a child or a spouse or a brother or sister, we're all going to experience. It's a fact.
Did you ever get, you mentioned a resilience there. I was talking about growth as well. I mean, d- did you ever get times of being cynical?
Yeah.
Do you get times being cynical now? I mean, does that ever go away? And if it how can you tell somebody or how can you advise somebody how to manage that, especially
Yeah,
when you've been through these moments in your life?
totally. Um, I would say now I don't. I don't get those moments right now of cynicism. But I think that you're going to experience so many different thoughts and emotions. And one of the techniques that I love is just there's this phrase, we are not our thoughts. We are not our emotions. And one of the things that I love to do is name that thought or name that emotion, and by naming it, you're kind of putting distance. By naming it, when it comes and you feel it, you can identify it. And I like writing things down. I like journaling, getting it out of your head, and understand that it's okay. You're going to have so many different thoughts. And this is like it's a very useful analogy, a very useful example, and it's also very harsh. But we've all been in like a high building or we've been in a high place, and we might think, I wonder what it would be like to jump. We've all been driving in a car and be like, I wonder what it would be like to swerve off the road. The difference is that 99 or 98% of us don't jump,
Yeah.
but people hold on to these certain thoughts. They become one with it. They start identifying with it that that's me. That thought is me. And that's when it gets dangerous, right?
Yeah.
And it could be the other way. It could also be like an egotistical way too, like I'm the best. And so we have to remember your brain is a very weird animal. And it's going to go to all different directions. And don't get so caught up with, oh, I just had a weird thought. I just had a morbid thought. I just had a cynical thought. Just understanding there's nothing wrong with it. One thing that I've realized is that all of us, we think we're very special. We think that we're very unique. We think that no one's ever had this idea before.
Yeah.
And in reality, a lot of things that we think are unique are actually common.
Right. So if we go back, we're going to go back a little bit. So you
Good.
mentioned there earlier on that you got your degree, and what was the degree? You got the degree in what subject?
Business computer information systems.
Okay, so can I ask, I mean, was that something you were always interested in? Or was this something that you were kind of like, maybe the family were interested in and you grew into it? Your mum or dad were kind of saying, or try this and try that, or was this something you kind of fell in love with from a young age?
I definitely fell in love with it at a young age. I always liked business. I always liked technology. And even when I was a kid, I'm talking about 17, 18, 19, 20, I was going into big companies in Manhattan and doing computer consulting, where
Wow.
I would everything from as simple as fixing the printer to setting up networks or setting up computers for people. I even went to like a couple of very wealthy people's apartments in Central Park West and like did their audio and stuff like that. So I was always interested in it. I thought it was amazing. I always thought it was amazing. And then when I graduated, I got a job in computers and I just liked real estate better. I just kind of flocked to that.
And with the real estate side, when you mentioned there you were 21 when you got your first home, I mean, how does a 21-year-old get a home at 21?
I don't know if it's possible now. I
Right.
don't know if it's possible now, but at that time, there were different loans where you could do stated income. There were different loans where you didn't, where it could go based on your credit alone and not your income. And so, with all that being said, it was just one of those times where you were able to do it. And that's what caused the crash, right? Because
Yeah.
all these people that probably weren't qualified, and I probably wasn't really qualified as a 21-year-old still in college. But that's what happened. And then all these people got their houses and it kind of spiraled out of control. What I did was I bought these houses and rented them out to other college kids.
Right. Wow, that's clever.
Yeah.
But where is the mindset? I mean, you mentioned about real estate, but if anybody's here listening to this wanting to get involved in real estate, I mean, how do you get involved? And give an example of what the industry is actually like.
Mm.
Is it
So
ruthless?
totally. I think a lot of business is ruthless. And now, the definition of ruthless can change depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
There are definitely people, there's a statistic that like something like 30%, 25 to 30% of CEOs in Manhattan are sociopaths.
Okay.
And so there are people that are very ruthless. What my definition of being ruthless is not to be heartless, but to just use your heart less. Meaning, you sometimes have to separate your emotions, right? Because everyone's going to give you a sad story. Everyone's going to give you a happy story. When someone comes and asks you to borrow money, they're going to say, please, this is going to be the best. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then what happens? When it's time to repay, oh, I didn't see the phone. Da, 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 right?
Hmm.
And then if you have an employee, and then they come and they say, oh, I'm having a problem. I need to take off early today. Okay, no problem. I'm having a problem. Can you pay me on Wednesday, even though I'm supposed to get paid on Friday? And then what happens is it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, the the owner is in the person's life and it becomes like you're part of their Netflix series.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to do that, you're not going to succeed.
Right.
So there has to be a point and you have to set up rules. And what happens is with people that start, they have less of these rules. And so when people start, they're more likely to feel bad. They're more likely to give the paycheck on Wednesday instead of Friday. And as you go through it and you see this pattern of some people will never bother you and get personal, and other people, their dog's name.
Right.
And
Okay.
so, and you have to say to yourself, you have to really have major boundaries,
Yeah.
and set it up at the beginning. It's like having a dog. When you first get a dog, you have to make sure it doesn't poop in the house because
Yeah.
once it poops, it's always going to poop. And so you have to set up these boundaries. It's so important. And so as you go through this process, you get harder, you get really strong and the shell kind of comes over to you where you separate yourself from these dramatic stories. And it's just yes, yes, no, no.
How do you manage that then, Brian? Because, for example, you mentioned there, like I've seen it myself many times, where you have certain individuals that you know everything about their life, and then you have the other individuals going about their job. They're doing a great job. You never hear from them, but when they ask for something, because you've had the issue with the other ones, they get the brunt of it as well. So I'm not saying in all jobs, but how do you
Yeah,
manage that by being fair to the worker that comes in at 9 or 10 to 9, finishes late, doesn't bother
right.
you, doesn't ask for holidays? How do you manage that then?
The real answer is you have to know when to pet the dog and when to beat the dog.
Okay.
And
All animal lovers here, just so you know, yeah.
I have two dogs.
Yeah, only
I'm an animal
joking.
lover. I'm not the biggest fan of cats, but I absolutely love dogs and dogs love me. But you really need to know when to pet the employee or beat the employee.
Right.
And if you have someone that's been working with you for X amount, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, and they are asking for something, you should give it to them.
Yeah.
Now, if you find that they're asking for Friday off, The first time you're going to say yes. The second time you might say, yes, what's going on? But now if it gets to the third or fourth or fifth time, like, hey, what's happening? Like you went 3 years with never taking a day off, and now this is going on. Like, hey, Mary, talk to me. What's going on in your personal life that this is happening? And try to figure it out because you got to get in front of it. You have to get in front of it.
But even for yourself as the boss, I mean, the how do you manage those emotions? I mean,
Mhm.
how if you're a manager listening to this or a CEO and you're kind of your hair you're pulling your hair out, how do you manage that?
It's fun. It's a very good question. I think a lot of people it's a muscle like going to the gym. And the muscle that I'm talking about and we're talking about here is dealing with people guilting you. And, there are some times where guilt is okay. There's sometimes when I say guilt, I mean feel bad for,
Right.
right? So if someone's, God forbid, in a car accident and they need time off, well, you should give it to them. You shouldn't fire them. You shouldn't expect them to work from the emergency room. So, but then if someone's like, oh, I don't know, like I have a son. Oh, my kid's graduating from nursery school. Okay, no problem. But then if all of a sudden, oh, I need off on Wednesday because I'm going to be a chaperone for, to take him to Sesame Place, that's not okay.
Yeah.
So it's just about having your EQ and it is about having some rules. But the real answer is, when you feel that level of either someone's trying to make me feel bad, someone's trying to make me feel guilty, someone's trying to make me do something that I really don't want to do, you need to have a light switch in your head. And this is why I go back to naming, right? So if you name that manipulation, then when you feel it, you're going to say, okay, this is manipulation.
Right.
Now, there might be good manipulation, there might be bad manipulation. If the person, like you said, is a very good employee, I wouldn't consider it manipulation. You might feel like that, but then you have to checks and balances.
Yeah.
But if it's someone who's really, because what happens most of the time when people are asking for really a lot of time off, most likely they're either trying to do another job, something is going on. Something's happening, and you have to really figure out what that is fast.
You mentioned the term there, a word there, EQ.
Hmm.
What is for anybody, because we've heard IQ, we hear all these terms.
Yes.
For anybody that hasn't heard what EQ, what is EQ?
So EQ is your emotional intelligence. So it's knowing that when someone says, hey, I just lost someone, you're not going to tell them a joke.
Yeah.
It's knowing that there's times for everything. And some people have better EQ than others. It's knowing, right? In this case, it's knowing that when a good employee comes to you with a problem, that you're not just going to close the door and say, deal with it on your own. You have enough EQ to say, come in, let's talk about it. And a really, really good way, and this is something good for any business owners or managers out there, you want to reward those people. Meaning, a lot of people are like, well, I'm not going to give Mary a raise until she comes to me and asks. But the problem is maybe Mary has a fear of confrontation. Maybe Mary is scared that you're going to fire her if you ask or if she asks. So if you see someone that's doing amazing and they're not asking, don't just say to yourself, well, I'm not going to give her extra money until she comes to me. You have to reward those people. You
Right.
have to pet the dog.
Yeah.
And you really need to. And I see that a lot. And listen, it could be money and it could be a title. You'd be surprised how many people out there, if you name them vice president, if you name them COO, CMO, if you just give them a title, they might be just as happy than if you gave them a 10% bump.
Right. And can the EQ be taught? I mean, and should companies be kind of, if it can be taught, and should companies be implementing this as a normal strategy to all employees?
Yes, in a lot of aspects they have, right? So like the whole misconduct
Yeah.
is like it's a version of EQ. It's bad EQ. So when you go to these, when you work for a big company and they do like, you know, anything about violence or sex or how to treat people, they're basically knowing that people out there don't have an EQ. So they're basically giving them ground rules of do not touch the people of the opposite sex. Do,
Yes.
if,
Yeah.
if you're having someone from the opposite sex in your room, don't lock the door and shut the blinds,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you have to, the fact is that so many people are missing EQ in certain aspects that they have these rules in place. That's why HR was created.
Right. And in terms, you think, I mean, there's a lot of that as well, Brian. There's a lot of that down to, say, cultural integration in terms of that, the world is not the small place we remember of years ago. And then you have, one, say, for example, an Irish guy living in the Middle East or working in the Middle East or in Asia.
Mhm.
Is that another example of EQ where I'm bringing my kind of culture or beliefs into the workplace, but I need to be informed which is actually right or wrong?
Yeah, I mean, totally. I feel like culture is very important, right? I
Yeah.
feel like it's there's an intersection. It's like a Venn diagram, right? I think that there is some stuff that is culture. Like I'll give you an example. Apple and a lot of these tech companies have a very like hip, cool. We're gonna have a couch in the office. We're
Yeah.
gonna have a ping pong set, right?
Yeah.
So that's gonna be the culture. You can come in shorts and a t-shirt, right? And then there's gonna be other cultures where if you work for a finance company or a big bank, you're gonna wear a suit. You're not gonna crack jokes. You're not gonna say inappropriate stuff. So I think that knowing the culture is very important. And that's why like with between YouTube and Reddit and Google, you want to basically when you go to another country, you do want to figure out what the cultural norms are.
Yes.
You
Protect
do.
yourselves at all times. Just
Yeah.
as Brian mentioned, like, leaving the blinds up where you're having a funky time is not a good idea in certain countries. Yeah.
Yeah. And listen, it's very interesting. I think that America in general has too lax of a punishment policy for things. But then you take the opposite. You go to Singapore, you go to Dubai, you go to Saudi Arabia. Listen, you can leave the fanciest watch. You could leave a $100,000 watch on a cafe, on a table. You can go to the bathroom. You can go outside for a cigarette. You can come back in. No one is going to take that watch because either you're going to be caned, they're going to cut off your hand, they're going to
Yeah.
put you in prison for a year. So the punishment is so high that they'll look down, they look at the watch, they keep walking because it's not worth it for them.
Yeah.
But when you get a slap on the wrist instead of getting your wrist cut off,
Yeah.
you're gonna be like, maybe I'll take that chance.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Don't do
Now,
it. Don't do
don't
it.
don't do it, you
Don't do
know?
it. Let's kind of move on a bit in relation to coaching. Um, to kind of keep it as simplistic as possible. We hear all these buzzwords like, self-discovery and personal empowerment and stuff like that. I mean, what are these things? Are they just kind of like another fancy term that's come into the world in the last number of years? I mean, how would
Mhm.
you explain that?
So I like the term life is a mirror. And so really what I'm saying by that is a lot of times people talk about stuff that they have no control over. So I'll give you like just real basic examples. I cannot control what the interest rates are. I can control if I go to the gym. So people will say, well, I don't really want to go to the gym. So I'm going to talk about how the interest rates are shitty.
Okay.
It's just easier to talk about things that you can't control because there's this level of separation. But when you look at yourself and you say, hey, what's going on inside of me is a direct correlation to what's going on outside of me. And the only way to figure these things out is by going in. And that's why meditation is very important. And that's why controlling these voices in your head are very important. And so it's like massively important because otherwise you just have a squirrel running around just saying different things.
You mentioned there, Brian, earlier on with writing stuff down. I mean, how would you take notes, or how if anybody there is kind of have all these kind of thought processes in their head,
Yeah.
what do you do to kind of separate them all, kind of put your ducks
Yes.
in a row? How would you do it?
So first I want to tell everyone out there, there's all these different techniques, right? There's breathing techniques, journaling techniques, praying techniques. It's not that some of them might work better for you than others, but don't get lost in the weeds. Meaning, just take a piece of paper and just start writing. And then after you have some stuff, maybe you're going to see patterns. Maybe you're going to see things. Like I'll give you what I do personally.
Okay.
I love WhatsApp. Do you use WhatsApp?
Yep.
Okay. I love WhatsApp. So what I do is I have different chats with myself. So I do a group chat with usually someone that I'm very close with. I remove them from the chat. So now I'm the only one left in the chat. I rename it journal. I rename it ideas. I rename it what do I just created a new one. Oh, I created a new one, garbage links. You know how you always get these Zoom links and links that are only good for one day?
Yeah.
So I just put it in there so that way it doesn't clog up my whole system.
Right.
And so I just create these lists and I just type it out. Now, sometimes I will get a pen and paper and I will write it out. And also, what I do is I love Google Drive. So, what I'll do is after a period of time, usually a week, I'll take the writings, I'll take my WhatsApp, and then I organize it really nicely in Google Drive.
That's a pretty clever way.
So,
And I
that's
mean,
what
do you find it yourself? It does help.
I find it massively helps. If you're suffering from rumination, if you're suffering from overthinking, imagine going into a supermarket and imagine I tell you, David, do me a favor. I need you to get me bananas, oatmeal, milk, and orange juice.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't write that down, you're going to go in and you're going to be like, bananas, oatmeal, milk, orange. You're going to start creating a song,
Yes.
right? You're going to start doing all these things to remember,
Yeah.
right? And so now all your bandwidth is going to there. So what are you doing? You're self-ruminating.
Yes.
You're making yourself ruminate to remember.
Yes.
But now, if you took out a piece of paper or you picked up your phone and texted me oatmeal, bananas, and milk and OJ, it's going to be out of your head and you're just going to be in the supermarket like, okay, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
And so if you can't sleep, you need to write it down. And what you're going to find, which is the craziest part, we still don't understand dreams. We still don't understand sleep really to the nth degree,
Yeah.
is that your brain will process it more. And one of the things that I found, like a real statistic, a real study, is people that dream more after a tragic event heal faster.
Okay.
And so we don't exactly know what dreams are going on. I'm pretty sure Elon Musk is going to figure it out sooner than anyone. And
Neuroscience or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, but it's massively helpful. Think about this. If you've ever seen a movie about the FBI and like they're chasing the killer,
Yeah.
what do they always do? They always have these boards, right? These whiteboards or cool little board, but it's the same stuff. It's pictures, it's
Yeah.
names. Why? Because if it's in your head, you're killing your bandwidth.
Yes. There's too much going on in there. Yeah.
And then when you see it physically, you're like, oh my God, there's a connection.
Yes.
When
Yeah.
it's in your head, how many times do you have it where you have a calendar, you have an appointment, and then someone asks you to do something and you know that it's there, but you still make another appointment?
Yes.
You see what
Yep.
I'm saying? Because
Yep.
but if you had an old school calendar like 1995, you wouldn't because it's on the wall.
Yes. No, it's very clever what you're saying because even with the sleep comment, I mean, the individuals that are having trouble sleeping, I mean, cumulative issues going forward, it's going to be problematic, isn't it? If they constantly can't sleep,
Totally.
health-wise.
I have a very good, very close person in my life that has that issue. He's a genius level and he doesn't sleep. He doesn't sleep. And listen, it's some people are wired differently. I'm not like the world's best sleeper. But when you're going through trauma, when you're going through a hard time, when there's challenges, it's going to interrupt your sleep because the dreams are going to become thoughts. The thoughts are going to become anxiety, and the anxiety is going to wake you up.
Right.
So I think, there's all these different things like going to sleep studies. There's different medicines if you want medicine. There's different holistic ways if you want holistic. There's meditation. Like something that I found extremely helpful is I listen to these like no like brown noise. It's like it's very cool. It's just like a
Right.
but they have different ones and different things, and I've found it very helpful because I've figured out that I am a light sleeper and I don't like to have earplugs. So by having this noise going on, it really helps me.
Okay, that's a good little tip as well. So,
Yeah.
what about then? Can I ask? I mean, throughout your, say, your life, your career, did you have any mentors at all? I mean,
Oh yeah.
was there anybody you looked up to? And if you did have a specific mentor, why did you zone in on that mentor? You know, sometimes you have heroes in your life and you have people you look up to, whether it be a family member or a sports star or whatever. But if you did have somebody, who was it, and why that individual specifically?
Yeah, so I've been very thankful that I've had a few amazing mentors. My number one mentor that I see and speak to all the time is his name is Marshall Wilkinson. And so Marshall, he's done $2.5 billion worth of deals. He has ran a $100 million company. He is very experienced and very knowledgeable on all things. He is a contractor, but it's more than what you think. It's not that he's has a hammer and a nail. He's very into the legal side of it, the contract. And so contract is part of contractor, but
Right.
most people don't realize that. So he's very much into contracts. And what I really love about him and what I really have learned is common sense. And the more you grow up, common sense isn't common.
No.
And so, like critical thinking, first principles thinking, taking a complex problem and breaking it down to smaller parts. Because, like you were asking me about the philosophies and stuff, whether it's life is a mirror or self-discovery, just watching a movie and getting that epiphany, that aha moment is not good enough. When you were a kid and you watched the karate movie and
Oh
you were
yeah.
like, I want to be a ninja.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you woke
Daniel
up the next day,
LaRusso,
you
here we
didn't.
come. Yeah. Yeah.
So just because you had that light bulb, just because you have that epiphany that I want to be a ninja, it actually doesn't bring you into the dojo, and it definitely doesn't get you there every single day for 20 years to get your black belt.
Right.
So action is the key. And I think that, a lot of people talk about manifestation. And I mix spirituality with the business. I mix common sense with spirituality because one thing that I haven't found anyone to manifest is a six pack. I haven't found anyone to manifest them benching 300 pounds. So, and what I find the most ironic, and I want to get your take on this, right? The same people that are on YouTube that are talking about, and first of all, I want to just give a disclaimer. It's not that it doesn't work. You just need to have action behind it.
Yes.
And so these guys and women that are on YouTube that are talking about manifestation, they're telling people to sit on their couch and get into a relaxed state and do their thing. Meanwhile, they're working their butt off.
Yeah.
They're coming up with the content, they're shooting it, they're editing it, they're bringing on guests like you're bringing on guests. They're doing all these things. They're doing the SEO, they're doing the optimization. And then they're sitting there telling you, just sit back on your couch and manifest.
Just so you know,
Meanwhile,
listeners, I don't do any of that. I'm too
yeah,
lazy. I like things organically growing, so I'm actually okay with it. But I totally
fantastic.
get you, Brian. I can see it because it's kind of like a double standard where is it a case of no disrespect to any of these individuals because they're obviously trying to make money and they're trying to get out there and fair play to them. But you kind of wonder is a lot of it pretend and only that individual will know themselves or whoever's
Yes,
doing it. I'm not
yes.
here to say that they are or they aren't, but yeah, we've seen it so many times, and then you find out later on in life that the individual's stressed out and are anxious and they can't handle the pressures and the fame. So yeah, no,
Like
I
the Wizard
totally
of Oz.
yes, yeah, it is. Yeah, it's funny because one thing I wanted to ask you there, kind of a little bit on from that, with regards to your mentor, Marshall. Did he ever mention failure?
course.
Because you mentioned like the high money figures, 2.5, billion, a lot of money. So
Yeah.
and how did he ever say he mentioned it? And even with yourself, Brian. I mean, irrelevant from kind of, not say irrelevant, but aside from personal let's say any circumstances or failures you had in your life or relationships throughout the years, or I mean, how do you manage it? Is failure good?
It's a great question. So I want you to think about two different things. I love metaphors. So either you can think about a baby learning to walk, or you can think about a teenager skateboarding.
Okay.
They both share one thing. They both fall on the floor a lot.
Yeah.
And so you cannot, really, you cannot have success without failure. You're never going to get everything perfect. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Elon Musk just exploded another rocket. Just literally, what, a week ago, not even. He just exploded a rocket over Florida.
Yes.
Michael Jordan missed 12,000 shots. To be an amazing baseball player, you have to hit the ball 30% of the time. To be a phenomenal basketball player, I think it's 50% of the time. And I think it might even be a little less for three pointers. Soccer, it's like scoring 7 out of 10 games.
Yeah.
So, when you think about it, look, the next time you have a hero out there, especially a sport figure, because it's much easier to Google. When
Right.
you have a sport figure, put into Google how many shots they missed. Google how many, like football, Google how many times they missed the ball. That's the stat that's important. That's the stat because without that stat, they wouldn't have the home runs. Without that stat, they wouldn't have all the championships. So I think what happens is people are scared of looking foolish. People are scared of other people's opinions. And people don't want to mess up. How many times do you, in your own personal life, you hear people that say, "Oh, I started a business, it didn't go well, so I'm going back to my job."
A lot of time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we have to realize that it's going to take more than one bite at the apple to get this thing done.
When you, Brian, were, you sold your 300 homes. I won't say
Yeah.
houses, I'll say homes. Worth a fair bit of money.
Hmm.
Um, did you worry about the success at the time? Now I'm going to go the opposite. So did you feel like, God, this is this is good. I'm kind of like the gravy train at the moment. Now obviously it's a lot of hard work, but did you
Yes.
ever have that moment where you kind of go, this could blow up in my face anytime?
It's interesting. I think that a lot of times, especially for me, it's easier to look back. Now, I'm not talking about living in the past, but it's easier to look back and be like, wow, that was the peak of the market, or that was really the best. That was the best shape I was in. Whatever you want to say. I think that when I was living it, I was just living it. I have this kind of philosophy that if you want to do something like imagine digging a hole. Don't just take one shovel and look at it and another shovel and look at it. Just keep digging and keep throwing that dirt and set a timer for 30 days and then see how big the hole is and see how big the mountain is. So I didn't really think like that because I was just focused on getting things done.
And did you have many sleepless nights?
Totally. Totally. Many, many deals fell apart. I've done houses, fixed them up and flipped them, couldn't get it sold, or there was an emergency, there was a flood, there was something broken, whatever it might be. So you definitely have sleepless nights, and that's good. That's part of the human experience. It shows that you're connected. And what's interesting is the same thing that we were talking about with people and maybe them trying to manipulate you, or people talking about asking you in awkward situations about, let's say, my wife that passed. As you do it more and more, you get used to it. As you do it more and more, it's not so brand new. And I'll give you an example. I have a client, he's fairly young, he's like 25. He's in sales, and he wants to get better with women. He wants to get better with sales. And we do a lot of spiritual stuff. We do a lot of common sense stuff. We do a lot of internal investigation. At the end of the day, you have to actually have action. So one of the things that I had him do, he was very scared to go up and talk to girls. I'm not a pickup artist or anything like that, but I'm a common sense guy. So what I did was I said, you need to get 100 no's. You need to walk up to 100 girls, not in one day. We gave a 1 month period. You got to walk up to all these girls. You got to, all you have to say is, would you let me take you out on a date? Would you give me your phone number? Whatever you feel comfortable. And when he started getting 20 and 30 no's, he realized that he's not dead. He realized that he didn't get slapped. He realized that he's still living, he's still breathing, he's still able to go. And so you need that. And so that's where I feel like spirituality sometimes lacks.
Right.
You need the time at bat. You need the frequency.
So, Brian, how then does your coaching work in terms of with regards to the services? So, if I was say, we won't say dating guy, say I was a lack of confidence guy,
Yeah.
and I coming to you and I want to progress my career, I want to grow my career. I mean, how does the whole system work? Is it like an introductory call? Is it like a number of sessions? So, sell yourself,
Totally.
Brian. Go for it.
So yeah, so we do have a consultation. I want to make sure that I can actually help you, right? That's the number one priority. I want to make sure that I can help you, and I want to make sure that you're at a good point in your thought process that you're ready. So like just for example, I deal with a lot of people that have lost someone that are business owners. Now, if they just lost someone, they might not be ready to get to that next step. But once they wake up and they say, which could happen in 3 days, in 3 weeks, and say, hey, I got to get my hands back on the business. I'm losing control. I got to get back into the business. Then they're ready to work with me. And so what I like to do is 6 sessions. I use what's called the neural release optimization. And it's a combination of different modalities. And so what we do is we do things like visualization. We do things like action steps, and we do all the things that we kind of mentioned plus more. I take things from the shaman, I take things from the psychologist. I have a lot of friends that are psychiatrists and psychologists that I get different systems from. I have a lot of friends that are hypnotists. And so I take little pieces that really, really helped me in my own journey. And I just formed it all together to get to where you want to be as quick and as fast as possible.
And what's the best way to get in touch, Brian? I'm looking up kind of nosy at your website at the moment, bryanisAmazing.com.
Yes. You can
And
either hit me up there, Bryan, bryanisAmazing.com, or you can check me out on Instagram, bryan.may, bryan.may.
and are you on the LinkedIn's as well or that type of stuff?
Yeah, I am, but I prefer Instagram. I mean, you could find me on there, but I don't really do LinkedIn too much.
I seen before we go, you mentioned your love of dogs, and you have, I think, of a Maltese, is it?
Yes.
And the other one?
I have a multi-poo and a shih-poo.
Shiba, my God. Okay, they're gorgeous. If anybody's listening to this, you're a dog lover, you can visit bryanisAmazing.com. You can see some two beautiful dogs
Yes.
on the
Actually,
website.
one of the dogs on there is a mini Yorkie.
A yapper.
Yes,
Oh, the
yes.
yap, 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 yap. They're
Yeah,
really good.
that's
So let me say
amazing.
thanks so much to Brian May for chatting in the Wellbeing Crew podcast. I'll put all the links that you can contact Brian directly. And great conversation, Brian. Thanks so much for chatting with me today. You're resilient. You know what I mean? It's when you see what you've been through, you're still moving forward. So you're an inspiration, and without me
Thank you.
being soppy or anything like that, which I'm not that type of guy anyway. You're doing great things. So well done, you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. And it was a great combo. I'd love to have one again.
Of course. Thanks, Brian.
Welcome. Thank you.